from Sharp Crafters, and he's going to come and tell us about aspect-oriented programming and how to write cleaner code using it. Just before we kick off, the usual gubbins. Our upcoming events, as you know, we have Scott Goo coming back for his 7th instalment, and he'll be with us on November the 19th. For those of you who've got that in your calendar, that was previously the 18th. There's been a date change, so you might want to check the Eventbrite page. Following on from that, we have Developing Testable Web Parts for SharePoint, and that is by Richard Fennell from Black Marble Consulting. As usual, we have all our links there. We have the official group ID 43315, that's in LinkedIn. We have the official, unofficial site at LIDNUG.org, which myself and Brian continue to do some good stuff with. The calendar links are a bit outdated now. We prefer it if you use the Eventbrite page. You can find the link in the home group. And of course, Twitter, Facebook, and email. So from myself and the rest of the team, that's Inbar, Will, Brian, Zane, Isaac, and Asset. I'm going to hand it over to Gail and enjoy the presentation. Over to you. Gail?
Yes.
Over to you.
Yep. So, here we go. Hello. The title is Produce Cleaner Code with Aspect-Oriented Programming. So, the title seems to mean that we are not producing exactly clean code and that we could do better. And this is what I will try to convince you of in the first part. I try to convince you that we have a problem in the way we are producing software with conventional object-oriented programming. Then I will show a simple aspect or a couple of simple aspects and how they can be combined together to deliver something useful and hopefully in a readable way. Then we'll go into more theory and see what the idea, what is the theory, the concepts behind aspect-oriented programming, and then go to technology comparison, because AOP is just an approach, and there are different kinds of technologies to deliver it. So I would like to give you an understanding of how these frameworks work and what are the benefits and the inconvenience of every approach. Then we'll go to a more advanced aspect and implement notify property changed with Sharp. So, first part is we have a problem with conventional programming. And to introduce this problem, I will tell you the story of a nice piece of code that used to be small and nice and efficient, and it doesn't last many iterations of the application lifetime. So in the beginning, there was nothing, like an empty class, customer processes. But fortunately, there was some business guy out there, and he found a customer. And the customer said, let there be business value. And there was business code. We found a programmer, and he coded business code. And this code is actually pretty nice, pretty clean, pretty small, because every line of code does something that is meaningful from the business point of view. So on the first line, I take a book from the store. Then I take a customer from the store. Okay, so it is possible for a programmer to explain every line of code to a non-programmer and still make sense. But then, yes, there was an issue, and the code was released without any change, anything more, and it didn't work. Okay, So the tester said, we are not able to reproduce the issue. Let's log everything. The error, I think, was something like a null reference exception. So the tester said, let there be logging, and there was logging code. And here you can see, in green, you can see the useful code that we used to be proud of, and in blue, the tracing code. Okay, here developers chose to trace in a very verbose way to trace every parameter, but it sometimes happens. So the team released this software with tracing and with analyzing the logs. They figured out that the front-end team sent a 0 value to book ID, and because of this, the book variable was null. Okay, so the back-end team was really upset because since the exception was thrown by the back-end code, they got all the blames. So they decided let there be defensive programming so that next time the exception will not be on you when the front-end makes a mistake. And there was precondition checking code in red. Not a big deal, just 2 lines of code, but the story is not finished. Then the application went through a new cycle, introduction, and it started to work, but when it got through a heavy load, there started to be some problems, okay, and some concurrency problems, because you can see here that we update the balance and there is no transaction handling and so on. So the team decided let there be safe concurrent execution, and there was transaction handling code. And because it was fashionable to use optimistic concurrency with automatic retry in case of conflict, this is what they implemented. And as in every iteration, the ratio between the number of lines of code and the features, this ratio is getting worse and worse. So new release, new problem. Next problem was that in case there was some exceptions, for instance, the balance of a customer was not sufficient to pay for a book, well, there was an ugly exception. And so the team decided, let there be user-friendly error messages, so let's handle exceptions. And there was exception handling code. And one more time, the ratio between lines of code and feature got worse. But eventually, the application was flawless, and the customer was really happy. However, someone has a different kind of troubles, and it is the architect. Because in a couple of months, he has seen nice code being degraded, progressively degraded into code where the ratio between usefulness and lines of code is 1 to 3 or 1 to 2. So there is an issue. There is an issue. Why are we forced to use that ugly code? Okay, I know that I purposely took an exaggeration here, and the actual ratio between useful lines of code and the infrastructure code is not that bad. But anyway, there is a high percentage of lines of code that is just not right. So why? What we want to do as developers is to have a nice separation of concerns. So a concern maybe, for instance, a business method, a business process, and so we would like, for instance, every business process to be in a single class or in a single method, and we would like every process to be implemented in different artifacts. We would not like a small concern to be split into different classes or files and so on. Okay, so we like a nice organization in namespaces, assemblies, and so on. So this is how we would like to write code. And unfortunately, this is how we are forced to use code, to write code. So you can imagine that the blue is tracing, light blue is auditing, red is transaction handling, and the orange is security, for instance. Okay, so we have concerns such as tracing that are scattered about whole the code, and we don't have this nice architecture where every feature or well, every concern that has a single color is implemented in a single location. And this is what we call with the name code scattering. And then we have the problem of code tangling. It means that if we look at one piece of code, at one class or one method, the code is much less readable because the lines of code that really do something useful and something with a business meaning. So these lines of code are mixed and lost inside a large number of lines that are just supporting the application and that are not directly useful for the business. And the third problem with the way we are writing code is code coupling. It means that the different components and features have more dependencies, and you know that that a good architecture has loosely coupled components, so that when we change one component, we don't have to change all the components that are coupled to this. So we have a problem, and we have this problem with all non-functional requirements or technical requirements. So non-functional requirements are the requirements you would typically not find in the functional analysis. Security, exception handling, tracing, monitoring, transactions, data binding like notify property change, thread synchronization such as locking or thread affinity or asynchronicity. I think the new word for this is asynchrony, caching, validation, and we could list a couple of others. These are the most common technical requirements, and the technical requirements typically cross-cut all the functional requirements because they are kind of orthogonal to functional requirements. So we have a problem, and the problem is how to encapsulate infrastructure concerns or technical requirements. But fortunately, we have a solution, and this solution is aspect-oriented programming. So, before going further with slides, I would like to show you some code. And I will switch to my desktop here. Okay, so I have a very easy application. This is a WPF application, a simple contact manager. I have a window, and I have a contact here. So if I build the application, if I run it, well, the application is written in a very naive way. There is no exception handling. So if I create a duplicate, here Magora was Swift. I create a duplicate, and the application shamefully crashes because there is no exception handling, so the unique constraint in the database is not handled in any way. So this is one problem, and the second problem is that it is very slow, and we would like to do things asynchronously, but I will show you after. So, first thing to do to make an aspect when you have PostSharp installed is to add a reference to post sharp. Here we go. Then we create a new class, because an aspect is a class. Exception dialog attribute. Then we import post-sharp.aspect. Okay, and we want this class to be a little special because it is an exception handler aspect, so we will catch exceptions. So we derive the class from onException aspect. And we are interested in overriding one method. It is onException. So here, what do we want to do? We want to display a message box. So message box dot show arguments dot exception dot toString. So this will display the message box. Then we want to swallow the exception, so to prevent it to be withdrawn after. So we have to tell that the flow behaviors is to continue, because the default flow behaviors for this method onException is to withdraw. So we would like to continue. So we have an aspect. I will make it serializable. And now, so this is, so all you see now here is an aspect. These a couple of lines of code. This is an aspect. But now we have to use it. Okay? So, and we want to use it on this method onApplyClick, and we want to have an exception dialog attribute. We start. And I try to create the duplicate. Click on apply, and I have this exception dialog. So, and if I go back here, you can see in Visual Studio, and if you don't see it, you would have to open the live meeting full screen by clicking a button here nearby. So, there is a new tooltip, and this tooltip says this method is enhanced by exception dialog attribute. Okay, so there is an aspect there, and you can see that the method is slightly underlined, which means that this method has been enhanced by an aspect. So now, what if we want to add the exception to all the click handlers? Because I may have hundreds or thousands in the application, and I don't want to apply a custom attribute to every method. Okay. So first, let's do it on all the onClick methods of this class. We will do this, apply it on the class, and we'll say that it applies only to the members with this naming convention. And now, if I build is done, I see that now the onDelete click method is enhanced by the aspect, and that this aspect has been applied to the type, so that I can see that well, if I don't know where the aspect has been applied, I can have a look at the type, and in the aspect browser I see that this aspect has been applied to two methods here. So now this was only for the class, and I can do it for the whole assembly and say that it would apply to all the all classes in the namespace. For instance, contact manager.allControl. And this will do exactly the same, because In my case, I have only a signal control. So if you like to rely on naming conventions, you can. It is not recommended because it is easy to break. If you don't want to rely on naming conventions, you have other ways that are more advanced and more complex, and I will not show today. And basically, you would use a link expression over reflection. So language integrated query over system.reflection, and you would select all the methods that must be the target of this aspect. So there is another problem with this application. It is that it is terribly slow, and the reason is that it uses a database located somewhere in North Siberia. And so that every time I access the database, the GUI is completely blocked during a couple of seconds. And I would like to have the apply operation running on a working thread, so the UI is not frozen. And here in the status bar, I would like to update it to working. And now, suppose that your aspect Superman has developed the aspects, and now you have to use it. And this is the game I will play now. So I have the aspect. I will remove the aspect objects down, include the aspects in the solution. So what do I need? What do I want to do? I have an aspect named on a worker thread, and I want this method to apply on a worker thread because it is slow. Okay, so this would work easily. So it's difficult to demonstrate on live meeting, but if I click on apply, you see that the application is directly responsive because this method is now executing on a worker thread. Okay, if you don't believe me, let's set a breakpoint here. We run the application. We click on apply, and you can see in the code stack that we are in the thread pool. Easy. And even this aspect is very easy. This aspect is a method interception aspect, and we just override a special method called unadvised on invoke, and all we do is to proceed with execution, but instead of proceeding in the current thread, we put it in the thread pool. That's all. So now we have to set the status text. So how to do it? I have created in main window here. I have created a method set status text, but this method must run on the GUI thread because it accesses the GUI, so it must be dispatched on the GUI thread. So I will tell on GUI thread. Okay, so now I can call this. I can call this from the control, and well, instead of using directly a code to call set status text, I will use an aspect status text, and I will say that this should be working. This should display the text working. And what this aspect does is simply to put my set status text method. Okay, on entry. So when the method starts, it sets the status text, and when the method exits, it sets back the previous status text. And the state between on entry and on exit is stored in this property method execution type. So there is a last thing to be done, and it is that the new exception handler aspect I've included here. It uses message box helper, and this method should also run on the GUI thread. Shoop. So Shoop is check actually. So now I run. So I click on apply, I have working, and it works perfectly. And if I create a duplicate, worth, where is it? So you see that it is working asynchronously, but the error message is displaying in the right thread, otherwise it will not work. So this is aspect-oriented programming. The code still looks nice. If I had to do this with well, object-oriented code or functional code, it would be much more difficult to read. So let me go back now to PowerPoint. Here it is. So you have seen what aspect-oriented programming is. Now let me explain you the idea or the concept and the theory behind this. So the theory is that we as software developers, we are solving a problem. And most of the time these are business problems or scientific problems. But principally with business problems, the reality is interwoven. There are concerns such as security, auditing, transaction handling, and so on, that are interwoven with all the business functions. So our reality is that we have cross-cutting concerns. So in the figure above, you can imagine that the red is customer management, the blue is order management, the green is transaction, and the yellow security, and they are all intercrossed. So this is the problem domain, what we have to solve. But how do we need to solve? What are our tools? If we want to make good code that is maintainable, we have to separate the concerns so that every concern is addressed in a different file, or at least namespace, or at least assembly. So there is a gap. There is a gap between our problem domain and our solution domain. And well, aspect-oriented programming is nothing but a solution to fill that gap, to bridge the gap between the cross-cutting configuration of our problem domain and the requirement of separation of concerns in our solution domain. This is aspect-oriented programming. And so aspect-oriented programming is an extension of object-oriented programming that addresses specifically this issue of cross-cutting concern. And in AOP, there are always two movements, two phases. The first phase is that you define an aspect. This aspect is most of the time a class, but the aspect alone doesn't do anything. The aspect, if it is not applied to some code, it is useless. So the second part is to apply the aspect to elements of code. And well, the reason why this is important, if it wasn't sure and clear so far, well, the first reason is that, of course, it decreases development costs just because it decreases the number of lines of code required to implement a feature. And the relationship between the cost of development and the lines of code of an application is super linear. So actually, if you reduce the number of lines of code, you also reduce you will reduce the cost more than proportionally. The second reason is to improve quality. Just because you have less lines of code, it also means that you have less defects, because the number of defects is quite proportional to the number of lines of code. A second reason why it improves quality is that it automates the generation of code that was previously done manually. So typically when you have an aspect, it means that you have a pattern, but this pattern cannot be automated. So what an AOP framework will do is to automate the implementation of the aspect. So you will tell the framework how the pattern should be implemented. But if you don't have a tool to do that, you have to do it manually. So you have all the issues that are related to implementing boring code manually. And you know, when you are bored, then you don't pay attention enough and the quality goes down. So, well, AOP allows the team to focus on pieces of code that are more interesting and therefore to concentrate the attention and to have higher quality. And therefore, it decreases maintenance cost just because the quality is higher. But another reason why it decreases maintenance cost is that the code is just readable. And maintenance is principally reading code. So when a developer has to implement a new feature to an application or has to correct a bug, so some researchers measured that the developer would spend 75% of his time just reading code. So now, if the code is more readable, if the number of lines of code is smaller, if there is less code tangling, it means that it is easier to figure out what the code is really doing. So it means that the cost of maintaining software is going down. And finally, another reason is to optimize skill sets, because if you are able to separate the concerns between components, it means that you are also able to separate the concerns between developers. So, for instance, multi-threading can be very difficult to cope with if you are playing with the primitives of the .NET framework. If you need to work with the reader-writer lock or the utexes and so on, it may be very difficult. But the aspects can make it much more easy to implement. For instance, you could make an aspect that takes logs, or that will check that logs have been taken when you access a property in writing, for instance. So this means that the knowledge required by the people who will use aspects, this knowledge can be more concentrated on the business issues or on the UI issues rather than on the technical issues. And in many teams, in many projects, there is a business team or a UI team, and there is an architecture team. And the role of this architecture team is to deliver the frameworks, the design patterns, and we can add to the job description of this team to deliver aspects. And so typically in this architecture team you would find the most technical guys, and in the business teams you would have guys who know the business processes better than the business people themselves. So I have been in both sides of the rift, so I know that well, there is no one side that is easier than the second one. Both are very hard. So there's a couple of myths about AOP, and the first myth is that aspect-oriented programming is new, and the truth. There is a little bug on the slide. The truth is that AOP is mainstream in Java. So AOP is 15 years old. So AOP has been invented in the same laboratory that discovered the mouse and all these useful devices and technologies that Xerox PARC has never been able to market. So, well, AOP has the same story as the mouse, and it all started in the years 94, 95, And in 2003, 2004, you could hear a lot about AOP, and a lot of projects have started. A lot of projects have died also from this period. So these were the years of hype. And now it has been 2-3 years that you don't hear about AOP that much, at least not from the Java part of the world. Not because it is not good, but because, well, people are just using it, and it is part of their productivity tools and not about the stuff they like to brag about. So now we are in the productivity years. When we have productivity tools, we have second generation tools, both in PostSharp and in AspectJ, and these tools have IDE support, Visual Studio support, tooling, and so on to support productivity. So this is, I think, where we are today after 15 years of aspect-oriented programming. But now, to support the myth that AOP is new, there is another truth, and the truth is that the object-oriented programming is 40 years old. So you see that there is a large time lag between the first research about the technology and the real mainstream adoption. Okay, but now AOP is mainstream in Java, and we are trying to make it mainstream in .NET with PostSharp. So a second myth is that AOP is an alternative to OOP, and I think this myth is only strong among people who don't know anything about AOP, because it is just a feature of the name. So unfortunately, the name AOP is what it is. It is some kind of opposition to OOP, but as you have seen in the first demonstration, it is actually a complement, because an aspect is a class. The advices, so the advice is the method that do the transformation, that do the interception. These are normal methods. So in the second generation of Aspect framework, we can clearly see that AOP is a complement to OOP, and there is not even new language constructs or that are required to implement this. So a third myth is that AOP breaks encapsulation. It is something dirty. It may break the invariance of the class or the methods and break the things that what the programmer thought were true. And here we have to be prudent with this myth. To some extent, it is possible to do very bad things in AOP. So, say that you have a property. A property has a getter and a setter, or say a field is the same. So you could have a useful aspect would be to encrypt the string, and in the setter you would have the encryption, and in the getter you would have the decryption. So this is an aspect that would not break the invariance of the class, because the code using the property always sees the same values. It's just the storage that works. But now, say that you have another aspect, and that the setter adds a star to the string, and that the getter just does nothing. So in this case, you would break the invariant, of course, because the aspect would have some effect on the field or on the property. Okay, so it is up to the developer. It is true that you can break something, but on the other side, major frameworks offer the ways to enforce that AOP is correctly used. So there are big efforts in PostSharp 2.0 to make sure that you don't do something wrong unless you really want it. And here I'm talking about features like the aspect composition. It means what happens if you put many aspects on the single method or property. Okay, so major frameworks have a development model that forces you to be disciplined, and it will not let you do things that are really wrong unless you really want it, such as this is my example of properties where we add a star in the setter and don't remove it in the getter. Okay, so the truth is that yes, you can do something wrong if you want it, but the new frameworks are really strong and robust, and we took this into account in the design phase, being robust. Fourth myth is that MSI rewriting is dirty, and it is a very interesting myth, because if you ask people about, you know, what is dirty anyway? What do you mean dirty? It applies to the floor. It applies to well, physical space. But if you don't define what you mean by dirty, you are not able to make progress. Okay. So, and the interesting thing is that, well, people are not able to define what dirty means in this case and to explain why it may be dirty. So it is a kind of intuition, but this intuition is not right, because .NET is based on the specification of the MSIL. So the CLR is able to run the MSIL code. It is not based on the specification of C# or Visual Basic or F# or whatever. So if you have code that rewrites MSIL and produces clean, verifiable code, then there is no difference in dirt or in clean. In the MSIL, you still can open the assembly using reflector and see exactly what will be executed at runtime. And then there is another interesting thing, is that the claims that MSIL rewriting is dirty may come from the compiler teams, but there are other teams inside Microsoft who don't think the same. And for instance, the Microsoft research team have released code contracts, and it has 2 post-compile steps. So these people don't think that MSIL rewriting is dirty. So this is a myth, but it is not a rational one. It is just based on some emotional reaction. A fifth myth is that MSI rewriting or PostSharp kills build time, and then there is a truth. It doubles the build time. So if you try to build your solution with or without PostSharp, the difference will be 1 to 2. So it is not a difference in order of magnitude. It is a measurable difference, a reasonable difference, and it is yours to think if it's worth the waiting time or not. So the good news is that in every release of PostSharp, in the first one, we have been able to improve the building time. Even when we added complexity to the framework and we added robustness, we were able to improve building time, and it's still going to be improved in the next version. So that's it for the what is AOP and some AOP myths. And now I would like to compare some Aspect frameworks. And well, when we compare AOP frameworks, well, we have to consider the problem of comparing from different aspects. Okay, so we have to take different aspects of AspectOriented Programming frameworks. And the first aspect is the expressiveness of the framework. This is what developers would call features or functionalities. So it is what are you able to express as a transformation, Are you able to just intersect methods? Or, well, are you able to enter the properties or events in a consistent way? Are you able to apply the transformations to all the methods in all the fields, or just to a subcategory of them, such as just virtual methods or public methods and so on? So, first thing to compare is expressiveness. The second thing is invasiveness. Suppose that you have a requirement like in the debug build. In the debug builds, you would like to trace all methods or all public methods. So, do you have to modify your code, or can you add the aspect just with a single line of code? If you have to modify your code, what do you have to do? Do you have to start using a container and factory methods and so on? So this is invasiveness, the measure to which you should change your code. The third is robustness. What happens when you scale from the getting started sample to a large project with several developers and 500,000 lines of code? What happens if you have multiple aspects on the same function, or on the same method? So, is the framework designed to handle these situations? Is the framework designed to detect if something could go wrong and so on? So robustness becomes important when actually you start using it seriously. Dynamism. Dynamism is once the project is compiled, are you able to add or remove aspects after it has been compiled and delivered by the development team, or do you need to recompile everything and go through a new cycle, and go through testing, and so on? Productivity features. And here I mean principally IDE integration. Is there some IDE extensions to support the experience of developing with aspects, or is the development experience in the IDE limited to standard object-oriented programming? And the last thing to compare, I think, is the support level of the frameworks. So this is what we have to compare. Someone has a question? I'm waiting for the question. And the question is how easy it is to debug the program using the aspects. Actually, I've shown this.
Yeah, I think Yogesh was a little bit late joining the presentation, Gail.
Please?
I think Yogesh was a little bit late joining the presentation. That's why he's asking that question.
Okay. So I would advise in this case to look at the recording, and I will try in the next live coding part. I will try to show something. Okay? So we'll continue with the normal flow, and in the next live coding in 10 minutes, we'll go back to this question. So this is what we need to compare, and it is not to say that PostRamp is the best on every of these points. It is not true. So some introduction to the technology of MSIL rewriting. I figure out that I should have put this slide before the miss. Anyway, suppose that your code are parts of a car. So as you know, a car is not built in a single factory. Actually, when we think of a car factory, it is an assembly line, and all the parts are done in factories around the world. Thousands of different factories for different pieces. So say that the parts are your source code. So the compiler, what happens here? Oh, okay. The compiler maybe compared to a part of the assembly line. So this robot, for instance, maybe your compiler, it takes different pieces and it assembles it. Okay. And the compiler produces something that it is a half-finished product. And PostSharp is like a second step in the assembly line of your factory, and it takes the output of the compiler and it adds its own thing, the windows, for instance, or it polishes the edges or of some methods, and so on and so on. And so that at runtime, when you run a car, you don't need the factory inside the car, and it is the same thing with MSL rewriting. Actually, so PostSharp is a medium-sized library, but when you run it at runtime, you just need a tiny library that just contains the interfaces that your Aspect have implemented. So the MSL rewriting is actually taking the output of the compiler and bringing some transformation, and it is just one step in the build step, or well, one step in the build process in the MS build. The same is true with code contracts, rewriter, or yes, the runtime rewriter. On the other side, proxy-based AOP frameworks are totally different, and basically it works by putting a proxy between the client code, so the code calling the object that has an aspect, and the target object itself. Okay, so there is a proxy between them. So actually, the client code doesn't call the object itself, but it calls the proxy. And there are three types of proxy. You can do an interface proxy. So interface proxy, it means that you use the dependency injection container to require an interface. And well, instead of giving you an implementation, the DI framework would give you a proxy, and this proxy would invoke the aspect and then would invoke the implementation. Subclassing is a little different, but it is very similar. It is you ask a class, instead of giving you this class, the framework generates a new class that derives the class you required, but it overrides the virtual methods. Okay, so the first approach, interface proxy, it works only with interfaces. The second way works only with virtual methods. And the third way is to use transparent proxies. So it is a kind of magic inside the CLR from version 1, and it's used for .NET remoting and recently for WCF. So in this case, the proxy is transparent to the client code. The client code has the feeling to talk with the target object, but actually it talks with a real proxy, and so this real proxy can invoke the aspect. So all the proxy-based AOP frameworks will use basically the same approach, and the advantage is that it can be dynamic. So there are two big families of frameworks. On the left, you have build-time frameworks, and I think PostSharp is the only survivor. There were some other frameworks such as AspectDNG, but the use currently is very small. And on the right side, you have a lot of dynamic frameworks like Spring.NET Castle or Microsoft Unity or Policy Injection Application Block. On the left side, you have runtime frameworks based on proxies. And then in the middle, you have LINFU. And LINFU is a hybrid solution because LINFU has a built-in rewriter and a proxy-based solution. So you can use it as a runtime framework, and if you want, you can enable the built-in rewriter and use it in a hybrid way. So I'm not very qualified to talk in details about LINFU, but I would put it like in the middle of both because it combines the benefits without going to the full level of implementation. So the fact is that the runtime frameworks are much easier to implement than a fully featured built-on EOP framework. So built-on frameworks are very expressive. You can have a lot of features. Talking about Post Sharp in .NET, but look at AspectJ in Java, you can do a lot of things. It is robust because being build time, you can check at build time. You can check some conditions. You can check that the aspect is being applied on the method or class that makes sense. For instance, if it is a on GUI thread aspect, you can check that the aspect is being applied on an instance method of a GUI object, for instance. Oh, but it is static. It is static. It means once you build the framework, it cannot be changed. Once you build your application, sorry, you cannot add aspects. So in the runtime, you have less expressiveness, less features. So it will cover less use cases, but still a good idea to start with. The model cannot be verified at build time because there is no build time. Yes, this runtime solution is invasive because you need to change the application to use a dependency injection container. So if you already use a dependency injection container, it may be okay for this part of your application. But be prepared to change the architecture of the parts of your application that don't use dependency injection because it works only well with this kind of architecture. The benefit is that it is dynamic, so that you can add aspects such as tracing or performance instrumentation even after build, which can be very useful if you get into trouble and you are in production. You can add aspects and add monitoring without having to redeploy, well, to go through the whole development, testing, deployment cycle. So I will go only quickly through these tables. Here I go into more details with the individual things to become part. So in Post Sharp you can do the most. In purely dynamic runtime frameworks you can do the less. And LINFU is something in between. I'm not a specialist in LINFU, so it may be a little inaccurate. I did my best according to documentation. So, second slide about expressiveness. How do you apply the aspect to code? So, good news is that all the frameworks support in some way custom attributes. Post Sharp supports the feature of multicasting, which is what I have shown, that in a single custom attribute you can add aspects to hundreds, thousands of methods just by defining filters and regular expressions and so on. Runtime frameworks work with XML configurations, and this is why you can change the XML configuration, restart the application, and you will have the aspects. And all frameworks in some way or another support adding aspect through C# code. Maybe simpler in Post Sharp than in the dependency injection framework, but maybe just an opinion. Yes, developer of a framework always thinks that his own framework is so simple. So, all do that. Next slide. Non-invasiveness. So, without surprise, when you have a build time framework, you don't have to change your source code to use the aspect. And this is important because then you can use on any aspect, for instance, on the WPF control. And you don't need to use factory methods. It means that with build-time solutions, you can use aspects on all the parts of your solution and not only on the parts that use dependency injection. Robustness and all the built-in frameworks support in some way aspect validation, so you can use reflection to say if the aspect is being applied, yes or no. But only PostSharp has an aspect dependency framework, which means that if you have a large project and multiple aspects being applied to a single method, then PostSharp provides a way to prevent, detect, and address conflicts. And it is very important if you take AOP seriously, then you can expect to get aspects from different vendors. For instance, you could get aspects from our partner Gibraltar Software, and you would expect these aspects to integrate correctly into your project. So how could they integrate correctly if our partner or the vendor has no knowledge of your code? Okay, so these are things that are addressed in an aspect dependency framework, and that is unique to PostSharp. And the reason why it is in PostSharp is that it is because PostSharp is a second generation framework, and that simply I learned in conferences that people had a trouble in the Java part of the world, so it was a problem that was worth solving for real production implementation. So, no good points for the other frameworks. The other frameworks are dynamic, so you can change aspect vectors with compiling. I've said this already once. Only PostSharp has a Visual Studio tooling. PostSharp has impact on build time. The other frameworks, no, because there is no build time. Of course, if you use linfo in compile time mode, then you would have an impact on build time. And so this is the support, I think, is fair from all the frameworks. Probably a little less from linfo. I don't know if there is a dedicated forum or so on. So you would find commercial support in PostSharp, certainly. In Spring.NET from SpringSource, which is now VMware, from Castor from a lot of companies, and for Unity and Policy Injection Application blog directly from Microsoft Consulting. So my own summary about this comparison, of course, I'm biased being the author of PostSharp, is that if you want to add the aspects on service boundaries, whether it is an internal service or an external service presented as a WCF service, then use your favorite application framework. You may already be using the Spring.NET or Castle, and there are some kinds of some classes of aspects that are just fine for these frameworks. And well, even in WCF, you can do some kind of aspect-oriented programming without any more code, and this is called custom behaviors in WCF. This is possible. However, if you take AOP seriously, and if you want to scale in complexity, if you want to add aspects to all the objects or GUI objects, not only to subparts of your application, then you should consider using built-in frameworks such as Bootstrap or AspectJ if you code in Java. Yes, and the good news in the last point, of course, is that you can mix. It is not because you use one that you cannot use a second one. So this is my summary, and how are we time-wise? I promised to take how much time?
1 hour 6 minutes, Gail.
Yes, Yes, I
You've got about 25 minutes. You've got about 25 minutes left, but we don't mind if you run over slightly.
Okay, so now I will take 10 to 15 minutes to show how to do more complex aspects. I would not expect you to understand everything because it may be quite difficult for just 15 minutes. So this is not the simple aspect. This is something more difficult. Switching to the desktop. So a simple aspect is what you are seeing now. This status text aspect. It is easy. You have on entry, on exit, and just set the text, and it is super easy. So now, what about implementing notify property change? Because here, see, if I change something, it is not updated in the tree view. If I click on apply, it is not even reflected. Here, I have to click on refresh so that the list is reloaded. So I will show you how you could address this issue with Bootstrap. I think the solution would not be too different in AspectJ. It would be very different with the runtime frameworks because they don't have the required features for this. So this is advanced, and it is already implemented, so it will be a little faster. Just have to remember how to do full screen in Visual Studio. Shift Alt Enter. So notify property change. It is an implementation pattern, and when you have a pattern and you want to implement an aspect that implements the pattern, the first thing to do is to try to explain in plain words, natural language, what is the pattern. So the pattern is, first I should introduce an interface to the target class. So if I want to implement notify property change into a class, the first thing is to introduce an interface. And this is what I say here with this custom attribute on the top of the aspect. I want to introduce the interface notify property changed to the target class. Then we define an event of type property changed, event handler of this name. We define and we want to introduce this event into the target class. Then the pattern says, you don't have to do that, but the right way to implement the pattern is to create a method named onPropertyChanged, and this method should be protected and it should be virtual. So what I do here is I add to my aspect, I add a method named onPropertyChanged. I have to make it public because actually it will be invoked from outside the aspect. But here I tell the AOP framework that it should introduce this method and that it should have this visibility and it should be virtual. Okay, and here is the implementation of the method. Simply trigger the event. So this is the first part. It is just introduce the artifacts, first part of the pattern. The second part of the pattern is take all properties that A, are instance property, B, are public, C, have a writer. So take all these properties, take the setter, and do this on the setter. Compare the new value with the current value of the property. If the value is different, then we proceed, we generally set the backing field. And then we invoke the event. So this is what we need to do. And the way we tell the AOP framework that this is an advice, it means it is a jargon word to say that it is a transformation of a method. So the way we do it is that we tell it that it is an on location set value advice. Okay, it just says that it should change the setter. And then there is a question: how do we say to which properties it applies? So we have to define a point cut. So a point cut is another barbaric jargon term, which a point cut is this. It is basically an expression like a mathematical function that returns a set of pieces of code to which the advice applies. So here we say that it is a method. We could have used irregular expressions or filters with to do the same. But here I chose to show it with C# code. So this method returns a set of property info. And here we have a normal link query. And what is really wonderful here is that we can use a link query over system.reflection to select all the properties to which we want our aspect or advice, to apply. Okay, so let's go back. We introduce the interface. We introduce the event. We introduce the onPropertyChange method. We changed the setter of all eligible properties, but now we still have one problem, because I did not specify correctly the aspect in natural language, because I did not say that when you apply iNotify property change, when you implement this pattern, and the parent class already implements the interface, you don't have to introduce the interface a second time. So what we say here is that we say, if the interface is already defined in the parent class or in the current class, then we should ignore it. We don't want to have an error or to override the implementation. And we do the same with the property and with the method. But then we have the problem. So what if we did not introduce the method? Okay, how can we invoke the method onPropertyChanged? So here there is a trick. We have to import it. So we define a field. The field must be public. It must be of a type of a delegate, and the type of the delegate should match the signature of the method we want to import. And here we say that we are importing the method onPropertyChanged, and this is a method returning void and taking a single parameter of type string. And at runtime, PostSharp will bind this field to the delegate, to the right implementation of onPropertyChanged. Okay, and now in the onset value, we can call the delegate we just defined here. So, because there is a gotcha here, and it is very important to understand what happens in the code. Because what would have happened if I had invoked directly onPropertyChanged? Well, first this onProperty change could be different than the one defined in the class, because this method could have been defined by the base class. It is one case, or it could have been defined by the target class, so not the base but the targets. Okay, so if the base class were already defines the class, so the pattern is half implemented. I don't want to re-implement the method, but I still need to call it. And well, another thing is that the method could be overridden by a child class. So we have to call this method, the method we introduce, in a virtual way. So here there is a difficult discussion, and it is well, you have to understand what you are doing in code. The good news is that it is not different in natural language than in C# or in code. Okay, so if you understand what you are doing, if you know how to implement it in code, then you can do it in how many lines of code? 80 lines of code. So this is the aspect. Let's now use it. I would like to add the feature to all entities. So I have a very large application with just 2 entities. Notify property change. Yes, but suppose I have 1,000 entities, which is not unusual in large business applications. So I don't want to modify all the entities. What I do, I put it on the base class, the entity class, and then I go here and I say, hey, this aspect should be inherited. So it is enough to put it here. And then the aspect would be applied to contact in country. So now this is defined. I can go to the tree view node. Voila, and I'm casting the class to notify property changed. I have a special kind of cast operator that's done at post-compile time, because the compiler does not know the method is the interface is implemented, and I add my handler that basically sets the tree view node. So let's do it. I don't forget I have to debug. So I will run it. So now if I update this, you see in the tree view that the tree view is being updated immediately. So, and what happens here? So let's go to what's happening. Let's go to the PostGIS browser. Go to the notify property change. We see that the aspect has been applied to 3 classes. I would like to see a little more. I would like to see all the properties that have been changed. So here I see that the aspect has been applied, has modified the property setter. So I move here. I have the property setter. I wonder if I can put a breakpoint of property setter, not an automated one. Okay, doesn't matter. I would put a breakpoint in here, for instance. So here I put the breakpoint here, and I go back to my application. No, this is not this one. This is PostGIS. So I change something. So what I see here is that looking the stack trace, you see that we are in the property setter, okay, contact.firstname.set, and that the property setter has redirected to the advice here. So we can normally debug and go further I will repeat the experience of debugging with the multi-threading thing. So say that I want to see when the status text is being changed. I put a breakpoint here. Oh no, this would be still more impressive to go to the contact control and put a breakpoint at the beginning of the method here. See what will happen. So back to the application. I click on apply. So I click on apply. So now I'm pushing F11. Okay, and I am inside the on-worker thread attribute. F11, I'm being pulled. This is okay. F11, I'm in status text. So here you can see that I am in the yes, I'm in the in status text because it is in the GUI thread. This is normal that I'm in the GUI thread because here I have the on GUI thread, and you can see that I have been sent. Where is it? I have been sent to the GUI thread by. Oh no, this is another thread. You should go to the thread list. Okay, but so this is okay. I continue. So now I'm inside the implementation of save. Yeah, this is why it is so slow, because I have the sleep thing. I lost my debug bar. I will step out, step out. Says I'm here, then I'm on the exit, on exit method. Okay. I'm back here. Okay. So what's happening there is that you can step into every advice, so every transformation you can step into. If you find it annoying, if you don't want to step, it is easy. You just have to use the debugger step through custom attributes, and it will not step. Well, it will step through and not step into. Okay, so this is the debugging experience. So basically unbroken. So yes, here you can see that well, the programmer who sees this code sees, oh, this is underlined and there is an aspect on this, and well, even if it is not, it is not obvious that there is an aspect on the class. With the tooltip, you can see, oh yes, it is applied on the type entity. So you go here and you see, yes, indeed, I have this aspect and it is being applied here. So this is the kind of support you would get with Bootstrap or with AspectJ. AGDT in the Eclipse plugin. So we've got 3 questions. I finished with this. I will go back to the slides for the really next slide, then we will go through Q&A. So I have shown composite aspects, yes. Aspect inheritance, yes. So yes, the summary is that there is a need for aspects. We have troubles with the way we are currently building software, especially business software, because concerns and requirements such as tracing and security auditing, exception handling, data binding, and so on. So all the infrastructure code cannot be implemented in a nice way. So we need aspects. And the great news is that we have aspects. We have great frameworks, so we can start using them today. So thank you. Before going to Q&A, I have something to announce. We have licenses. We will give away 20 licenses. We will give away 20 licenses, and I will give you the code. There is a password. I will share the desktop. So yes, please go to this URL. Please apply for a free license. you need to sign in with a Google ID, create an account, and then you would apply for a license, and we will answer in hours or next day if we can. So write down this, and please apply within 30 minutes, maximally 1 hour, so that we don't get requests from outside. We will be checking the requests from with the list of participants, so it is only for the attendee. So now this is time for. Let me go back to my next slide. Yes, we have great frameworks, la la la. And come on, what happened? Yes, this is the end. Thank you. And I'm taking questions.
Excellent, Gael. Fantastic. There's 7 questions in the Q&A. Do you want to just look at them yourself, or do you want me to read them out for you?
Please read the questions.
Yeah, all right. The first one is from Brent Pellet, and he's asking, do you have any recommendations for books to read on the subject of AOP?
There are great books in the Java spheres. You can find a book. I think it is named AspectJ in Action. So in this book, I think you would find one third is not specific to AspectJ and will really convince you of what AspectJ is good for. Unfortunately, there is no book for PostSharp. It's one of the things I would like to work on, or to partner with people to work on a book. So now we only have the resources from AspectJ, and there is the PostSharp documentation, which is well, it is fairly documented. Some people say it is PhD level. I think it's maximally master level, but you can find a lot of useful information there. So a mix of both, a mix of AspectJ and this online documentation would do the trick.
Excellent. All right, we got a second question from Ernest Griffin, and his question is, do you see a synergy between using PostSharp and Unity 2?
And?
Unity.
And what? Unity? Microsoft Unity, you mean?
Yeah, I suppose so, yes.
Yes, actually, 3 years ago, I think it was 3 years ago, I did a bridge between Microsoft Policy Application Injection blog and Unity, and PostSharp. So no, Unity is not exactly this. So one thing you could do is to use PostSharp to build up the objects. Okay, so if you use Unity, you would need to use a factory method. And now, if you use an aspect on the constructor, you can force the constructor to call the build-up method with this aspect, so that you don't need to call the factory method, and you can still use the constructor in the usual way. This works well. Kinds of work. I have never invested much time on this, but it's easy to make a prototype and see if it's enough for what you want. Excellent.
Thanks for that. Got more questions, of course. Charles Jekyll is asking, are there lots of users of PostSharp for ASP.NET? And what are some of the common usages for ASP.NET developers?
For ASP.NET, well, I think it depends on the size of the application for ASP.NET. So if you are doing small websites, without any business logic, then the opportunities are quite limited, I think. Now, well, even for small websites, you could use an aspect, for instance, to manage the session state. Okay, you could change a property. So you define the property in a class and make it persistent to the session state, for instance. This is very easy even for small applications. And then for the bigger applications, you could have all the backend aspects, just as caching, for instance. You could make an aspect that just makes the method cache. So here I can show you. So the application I have been demonstrating, so Simple Contact Manager, is a part of the PostSharp download. If you go to the samples, then you will find it. But so here is a caching aspect. It's useful in any server application. You would just have to change the cache implementation. You have data validation. So there is, I will go back here. There is a part of the website, go to documentation and then go to examples, and you will see sample code for different kind of usages. So here you can see security monitoring is also interesting for ASP.NET. Yes, persistence in the view state or session state or context items. Yes.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Okay, got more questions. Asset is asking, is PostSharp for C# developers only?
No, it can be used with Visual Basic also. It works with Visual Basic. So, well, theoretically it works with MSIL, so it is language agnostic. However, languages such as F# or different compilers can emit code that has not been tested with. So what is officially supported is C# and Visual Basic. What is well, and all the languages are like, well, unofficially supported, means untested. But now, if you go to dynamic languages, for instance Ruby or Python, then it is another kind of stuff. Okay, if you want to make aspect-oriented on programming on Ruby, you will not rely on the same implementation patterns or on the same technology, because since everything is dynamic and since there is a proxy for everything, then you have other ways to hook into method invocations. So you would use frameworks that are specifically designed for Ruby. Here I'm thinking of Aquarium, I think, of Dean Wampler, and I think there is a, well, there are frameworks, OP framework for PHP, for Ruby. I don't know if in Python there is. Probably yes. Okay, so static languages yes, but it is tested only with Visual Basic and with C#. This is a short answer.
Be interesting to see. Again, it would be easier to put a prototype together, wouldn't it? So, interesting. Josh is asking, what are the best practices for organizing aspects in your solution? Should they be placed in their own namespace, separate into their own assembly?
So I don't think that one is so better than the other one. I would personally prefer grouping aspects by the domain. For instance, if you have an application framework, for instance, mybusiness.threading, and you have your own wrapping of the .NET primitives, then it would make sense to put all the threading aspects into this namespace. I would do it this way. Yeah, so I would I would prefer this way, but it doesn't really matter for the performance or for PostRamp itself.
Thanks. Joel is asking, is NUnit's use of test fixtures and test attributes an example of aspect-oriented programming?
No, this is an example of use of reflection. So the difference in the way that PostSharp and NUnit use custom attributes is that NUnit, yes, they would use some reflection at runtime to read metadata about the methods. So the metadata means and says that the method is a test case or an initialization method and so on. Mm-hmm. In PostSharp, you can think as custom attributes or as aspects as things that really modify the behavior of the method. So it is not pure metadata. It is not just a tag. It is not something you would need or like to reflect on. It is really something that modifies the method. So on one side, metadata, tag, annotation. On the second side, modification of behavior.
Excellent. And we have a question from Twitter. Johannes Hopper is asking, can you show the correct usage of the skip PostSharp compile time flag?
Yes, so the correct usage is to go to the project properties. Then you go to, oh, I should stop the debugger. Then you go to build, and then you go skip PostSharp. And now you build. And the application is as before. There is no working. Okay, the aspects are not applied. So ma, gore, x, wolves. Okay, so we don't have the aspects. So this flag skip PostSharp. It is useful when you have an assembly that references PostSharp.dll but has no aspect inside. Because, well, PostSharp integrates in the build process and it looks at the reference here to PostSharp. And when it sees this reference, so PostSharp would kick into the build process. So what's important to understand is that the build process checks the presence of this reference before launching PostSharp, because PostSharp is expensive to run. Okay, so in case that you have an assembly that references PostSharp but does not need to be transformed, then you need to put these compilation symbols to tell the build process it is not necessary to build PostSharp. Don't lose time. There is nothing to do. This is what this tag is doing. So of course you can do a new configuration if you want, and to make a conditional compilation. I could show you something useful in the same spirit. You could do something like this. It is not documented. So here you have the error, and if you run PostSharp, what's the problem here? Oh, is this the syntax? I'm lost here. Well, if you get the right syntax to this, then this is going to work.
I think it's if-def. Yeah.
If-def? No, if-def is in C++. The problem is with the error here. But anyway, this is not so important.
All right.
Well, the problem with live coding is that there is no time to look in documentation. But
True.
yes.
All right. 2 more questions. Marcus Tors is asking. I was a little late, so I'm not sure if it was covered. How does PostSharp handle concurrent and asynchronous scenarios? Not C#5. Are there any limitations on these scenarios?
So there is a big difference between the features provided by C#5 and what you can do with PostSharp. So C#5 will basically change your code. It will make a state machine so that the code doesn't wait. Okay, so when you have the keyword await, what it will do is to break the method in 2 parts and to execute the second part of the method after the thing you are awaiting for is completing. Has completed. Okay, this is what the keywords are doing. PostSharp does it in a different way, which is absolutely not competing. It is very alternative. You can do your own aspects, such as on GUI thread here, or on worker thread, or you can do some aspects that to have read logs, write logs, or like observer logs. Okay, so, and this really does the job of well, putting the methods on the waiting thread and so on. So well, PostSharp would not change the signature. It would not change the flow of your method. It would just put it on a different thread and marshal the execution from one thread to another, or use logging. So I would expect that people will get used to more asynchronous programming and will be more interested in AspectOriented programming because it is so complementary.
All right.
Yes.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, there's one more here. Ernest Griffin is asking. I heard that this presentation will be available for download. When and where will it be? Can you include your code solution before the modifications and after the modifications? Now, yes, the presentation will be available for download. The full recording will be on the LIDNUG website. I'll show that to you guys when we are done here. Now, as to if we can put the code solution off, we have no problem with it. Gael, would you be happy to provide your little code solution?
Well, the code is included in the PostSharp download. Okay, so if you download it and it goes in PostSharp. What happens here? You go to PostSharp here, to samples, and this is this one. So what I did before the presentation, I removed the reference to PostSharp and I commented out this directory here. I just did exclude from project, then I removed everything that was in the res. So this is all in the download.
Fantastic. Well, that's a good idea to go get it then. And of course, there's some people that will be getting a free license also.
Yeah, can you show the link again? Because I've been asked by a couple of people who missed it and didn't get it written down.
Yes, I will show the link again. Here it is.
Thanks.
There we go. Excellent.
Yes, another question?
No, I think that's it. Definitely want to say thank you, Gael. It was very, very interesting to see aspect-oriented programming presented this way here. I remember it from the old Java days as well, but it seems that it, with PostSharp, it's definitely taking a more say structured approach to it by using something like the PostSharp framework.
It's definitely a good framework. I mean, I actually got a copy of the PostSharp library off Gael, and I've been having to play about with it, and it really does look nice. I mean, just cleaning your code up the way that it works is worth its weight in gold to start with. You know, there's just no two ways about that.
True. All right. Anything else to add, Gael?
No, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to talk about aspect-oriented programming. I think we are really in a second generation of frameworks, and the tooling in Java and in .NET is getting better and better, and we are really in these productivity years now. The hype has gone, and now we can deliver results.
For sure, for sure.
Fantastic. All right, guys, I promised to show the link for where the recording will be. And I will do that in a second when the right slide comes up. There you go. It's on.
We don't actually have the link on there, do we? We've
No,
just
we
got
don't.
LIDNUG.org on there.
Yeah,
No, we don't.
Dub.
But if
.org.
guys, if you go to www.lidnug.org, you'll see there's a little toolbar thing across the top. Just click on the archives button and it'll take you straight to it. We've got some other bits and pieces there as well, a news page and a blogs page, and we will eventually be making use of all of those. You know, so it's worth having to poke around. You know, the content's a little lacking at the moment, but we will get there. We're writing some neat stuff for it, that's for sure. Myself and Brian have been hard at work slaving over Visual Studio 2010 to make some nice bits and pieces to go in there.
Definitely. All right, just put a small text file up here, just with the two things. There's the recordings, www.lidnug.org/archive.aspx, and of course, don't forget the PostSharp license. Again, get yours before it's late. And it's
Just a word if I... Do I still have the microphone?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, you do.
The PostSharp license there are two kinds of license, and well, one is free, it is a community edition, and it doesn't come with all the professional features that I have shown, especially in the second part. So the one that you will receive is the professional license. So, okay. So, and then you get all the features that have been demonstrated.
And just Felix just commented. Thanks for that comment, Felix. He said, thank you, nice talk. Introduced PostSharp in one of our projects, and it really is great when it comes to service interfacing, logging, authorization, and exception encapsulation. There you go. Somebody asked for some scenarios where you be ideal to implement PostSharp. And I think, yeah, logging, authorization, and exception encapsulation is definitely some of the areas.
Well, if you remember, I was... sorry, go on, Gael.
I have a really good use case of PostSharp from a company using doing 3D editing software, and they are using PostSharp to implement the undo-redo system. So it means that you can imagine that they have a complex model with hundreds of classes, and they have, well, it is a user interface, okay? It is a 3D editing software. So they use PostSharp to do the undo-redo system. It means that it saves them for every property or of hundreds of objects. They are saving 2 lines of code, at least. So,
well, my little experiments that I've done so far with it, one of the best uses I've found for it to date is when you're parsing XML using XDocument and XElement. As a lot of devs out there will know, when you're pulling data in from an XML file, you're always pulling it in as a string. Now that data may be an int, it may be a bool, it may be a date time. And you've always got to wrap that conversion up into something like an int.parse or a datetime.parse. And I found a really good use for using PostSharp to actually provide that data conversion pretty much automatically. So that you literally just grab the element. You've got to wrap it up in a little bit of a custom class, but you grab the element, you pull it in, and there's a little tag in there that you're telling it what type of data it is, and it does the conversion on the fly for you.
Yes, and the same when you have application settings in ASP.NET also, you can make a class and make an aspect that will actually map a property to an application setting. The same if you have registry setting, you can map a property to any storage actually. So, for instance, the product data objects.NET, they use PostSharp to make the objects persistent because they add an aspect to map the property to a database column.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the idea that you came up as well the other week, Gael, when we were talking via email, you mentioned the system registry. The system registry is another prime candidate for that kind of data conversion where PostSharp can help as well.
Yeah.
All right, guys, I think we need to stop the recording.
Blimey, I thought we had already.